Hello, welcome to Transfer Talk. Coming up here in the next hour, Kylian Mbappe has the big decision to make. Will he head to Saudi? An update to bring you in just a moment, where he could be set to make even more money. Also on the way, Tottenham boss Ange Postecoglou is faced with more questions about, yes, you know who. And Manchester City boss Pep Guardiola says he hopes Kyle Walker stays at the club amid interest from Bayern Munich. Good afternoon to you, and good afternoon once again to our panel today. Nabaid, Dan and James with us today. You can join the conversation wherever you are as well. Just use the hashtag TransferTalk. Let's get things started with Kylian Mbappe, who has that decision to make on his future now. Saudi side Al Hilal have had a world record offer of £259 million accepted by PSG. They've been given permission to talk with the player and his representatives. A few more details emerging this afternoon on his current contract situation. James, just bring us up to speed with what we now know.
Yes, another development, Dave. A loyalty bonus of €60 million Kylian Mbappe will receive if he is still a PSG player next Tuesday. Now, his contract states he is due a gross fidelity bonus payable in instalments subject to certain conditions. Now, PSG insiders are urging Mbappe to speak to Al Hilal about this potential offer after they accepted that world record bid, €300 million. And PSG view this as a win, 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 win for all parties, especially if it's just for one season. He'd get a huge loyalty bonus, a signing-on fee from Al Hilal, which would be extraordinary, huge wages and a free transfer to Real Madrid, but we know there'll be a massive signing-on bonus for him. PSG will at least get some return on their investment, and this saga would end before the season starts. Let's bear in mind they've got a new head coach in Luis Enrique. Real Madrid would get the player they've always wanted for free, albeit, as I say, with the massive signing-on bonus. And then Al Hilal and Saudi Arabia get perhaps the best player in the world right now, albeit for one season. So, as far as we understand, Mbappe is still set to be in a position where he's happy to see out his contract at PSG. But I think PSG feel that the weight of feeling amongst the fans and in France at the moment means that maybe his resolve could crack sooner and he may be willing to move elsewhere.
I mean, you talk about his willingness to see out the contract. We've been told that he would, if it came down to it, sit on the sidelines rather than sign a new contract at PSG and essentially forego a year of playing football to sit on the bench at Paris Saint-Germain, or maybe not even on the bench. Would that do damage to Mbappe if he was to essentially just have a year out?
It's a tricky one because ultimately Mbappe will want to play football. I think there's perception that maybe Mbappe wouldn't mind because he's so desperate to go to Madrid. I think everyone pretty much knows that eventually, whatever happens, he will go to Madrid. Whether he stops at Saudi, whether he stops on the bench in Paris, whether he maybe goes to Tottenham, like Tottenham fans seem to believe all over social media he might be going there. Wherever he may go, he will end up at Real Madrid. So I don't personally think if he decides to stay at Paris Saint-Germain, I think that he'll play. Luis Enrique will just say to him, well, you're going to be here for another 12 months. You may as well play your 12 months out. And I can't imagine a player of his calibre will be happy to sit back and go, you know what, I've got no interest in playing.
OK. Any updates, we'll bring them to you here on Sky Sports News and here on Transfer Talk. Tottenham head coach Ange Postecoglou has been speaking to the media this morning ahead of their next pre-season friendly in Singapore. Now, he's been asked about a number of issues. You might know which one was number one, of course. It was the striker situation and Harry Kane. Not really an update from Ange Postecoglou today. He says no news on Harry Kane at the moment. There's nothing changed on that in the last couple of days. That's a direct quote from Ange Postecoglou. He was also asked about Ollie Skip, and Ange says that he is 100% part of my plans. Also asked about Davinson Sanchez, and he says that Sanchez is exploring his options. Ange Postecoglou also said that they're looking to bring in at least one centre-back. He says there's no frustration. It's just the football world. I've been around long enough to know how it works. Ange Postecoglou talking to the media ahead of their next pre-season friendly in Singapore. Obviously, he's asked about Kane. There's no movement on that situation at the moment. His future's still uncertain. Who does Kane suit the most if he was to leave Tottenham? Not perhaps where should he go, but who does he suit the most in terms of his playing style?
Bayern sticks out, and Manchester United obviously has the two options. Those are the two that most people are talking about as well. I think his combination with Rashford at Manchester United would be very similar to maybe his combination with Son at Spurs. Then I look at Bayern and I think he wants to play in the Champions League. He wants to potentially compete for the Champions League at some point. A player of his calibre has missed too many years of playing European football. And Bayern definitely have the finances to sign him as well. And also Bayern, I wouldn't say Kane and Lewandowski are identical, but there is some similarities in their game. And so those are the only two real options. I know he's been linked to absolutely everyone across Europe. Real Madrid have been linked as well. I don't know how that happens if they get Mbappe, Vinicius and Kane and Bellingham. I mean, if there is one club in the world that can make it work, it is Madrid. But it is between Manchester United and Bayern Munich in terms of what I think Harry Kane suits the most.
OK, well, Sky Germany reporter Florian Plettenberg has been following this story closely. He's in Tokyo at the moment and he's just sent us this update.
Bayern has arrived in Tokyo on Tuesday, and very important to say is that CEO Jan Christian Dresen and the technical director of Bayern Munich, Marco Neppe, they have stayed in Munich for reasons, because they have to finalize, they have to work on transfer targets. One of the top transfer targets is still Harry Kane. He said yes to Bayern Munich, as he can really imagine to join Bayern this transfer window. The next steps for Bayern, they are very clear. They want to speak and to negotiate with Spurs boss Lavia with all of their respect. Quite full. Without any stress, Bayern Munich want to sit down on the table with Lavia again. Maybe in the next days, maybe in the coming weeks, Bayern Munich will take their time to negotiate and to finalize the transfer of Harry Kane.
Florian Plettenberg there, Sky Germany reporter, sending us that in from Tokyo. We know that preliminary talks have been held between Bayern Munich and Tottenham on Harry Kane. So we'll see whether further talks develop on that. Just to go back to what Ange Postecoglou was saying, he was talking about Tottenham needing a centre-back in this window. Is that, I mean, it's the obvious area, but that seems to be the right area that he's looking to strengthen.
Yeah, until they know what's going on with Kane, I think centre-back is a priority. The Spurs defence has almost come a little bit tired, in my opinion. It needs a little bit of a refresh now. They've refreshed the goalkeeping department, which may help. Hugo Lloris looks like he'll move on, and Vicario's come in to probably be number one, but by the looks of things. But I just look at Spurs' defence, and I do think Pedro Porro, who's now signed permanently, I think he'll be a useful addition. I think playing under Postecoglou will really suit him. It'll enable him to get forward, fly forward from right back. And I think there's promise there, there's potential there from what I saw of him last season, even if he did have off games. Spurs together as a team weren't good enough defensively, and Eric Dyer's forms fell off a cliff a little bit. Him and Ben Davies have been at the club for a long time, so I just think Spurs need to do something. I think if Postecoglou has his way, he will bring in a new centre-back. They were struggling to play Conte's more pragmatic defensive football. You're now asking those same defensive players to play in a more expansive style under Postecoglou. Now, if they were struggling to defend in a system that was built around being defensive and having a solid foundation, I think those same players may struggle in the way Postecoglou wants to play.
Kyle Walker as well, we were talking about him a little bit earlier today on Good Morning Transfers. He's expected to be left out of the Manchester City side for the match against Bayern Munich tomorrow as discussions continue about a possible move to the Bundesliga. We are told that Walker's keen on the move. City, from their point of view, they've offered him a one-year contract extension. Since we were on air this morning, Pep Guardiola has been talking about Kyle Walker and Bayern. Initially, he said no comment, but he says he's an important player for us, talking about Walker. We will fight for him, he says. Will he play tomorrow? He's our player, and we hope he will be with us the whole season. So a little bit non-committal, really, on the future, but he does say that he will fight for him. He's obviously been a vitally important player for Manchester City since Pep Guardiola has been at the club, even though he spent time in and out of the side for periods of time. Is it the security that Bayern would offer Kyle Walker, a potential difference maker here for the defender?
Yeah, I think there's two different reasons here. A, the contract on offer, but B, also the role that he'd be given at Bayern Munich. So firstly, in terms of the role, we saw it being diminished at times last season under Pep Guardiola. Yes, he played in some of the high-profile matches, but there were many times when Rico Lewis was preferred, Akanji was preferred, sometimes even John Stones playing right back as well. And of course, he missed the Champions League final. He came off the bench towards the end, but I think that would have really hurt him. And Pep Guardiola made comments earlier on in the season about him not fitting within what he wants from a right back. So he did lose his role at times, and we know he'll have a really prominent role if he does join Bayern Munich under Thomas Tuchel. But secondly, there is that contract, and I think that is one of the most significant things. City currently offering, as you say, a one-year contract extension to what he currently has. He's out of contract next summer. But Bayern Munich thought of offering him a 2-year contract with the option of a 3rd year as well. I think Man City would absolutely love Kyle Walker to stay, and you see that with the comments that Pep Guardiola has made, because somebody coming into a Pep Guardiola side has to adapt and take time. We see that takes players even a season or two to be able to adapt to what Pep Guardiola wants. So I think it would be a disaster to lose him at this point in the season unless they have a ready-made replacement, because with Cancelo looking to be not part of the plans, it means Rico Lewis is going to be the only real recognised right-back heading into this season.
I mean, we speak of Kyle Walker as a footballer and how good he is in those one-on-one situations and how, you know, in a big game, there's no better right-back defensively. But Man City have already lost one leader in Gundogan. Now, I know they've got a lot of leaders within the squad, but if you lose Gundogan, you lose Walker, there suddenly is kind of a leadership void. And City have always been very good at filling those gaps when a leader has gone and putting someone back in that leadership group. I do wonder whether I think John Stones' game over the last few years has come on so far. I think he's one of the best defenders in Europe. I wonder whether he's now ready to come in and be one of those real leaders within the City squad.
So, as it stands, we expect Kyle Walker to miss that game against Bayern Munich, but we'll see what eventually transpires when Manchester City face Bayern Munich. Done deal to tell you about at Nottingham Forest in the last hour. Anthony Elanga has completed his move from Manchester United. He signed a 5-year deal. We understand it to be worth in the region of £15 million, that transfer from Manchester United. Next here on Transfer Talk, we're going to talk Italian football. Mina Rizzuki and Nicky Bandini are with us. We'll have the latest on Romelu Lukaku, Rasmus Højlund and much more. Do stay with us. Welcome back to Transfer Talk and the return of our Italian football experts, Nicky Bandini and Mina Rizzuki. Lovely to see you both again. Thank you very much for coming in. Happy transfer window. It's back.
I know.
Feels like we've never been away. We've got lots to cover this afternoon, so we'll start with some of the transfers that have already happened between Premier League and Serie A. Any deals that have stood out for you so far?
I think we have to start off with really Sandro Tonali. I think that was the biggest one that, frankly, if you spoke to anyone who follows Italian football closely, especially after what Milan did in the Champions League, you just would never have thought that would happen, simply because of how devoted he was to Milan. I mean, the great story was that he took that pay cut to stay, and then Newcastle comes along and he agreed to the challenge. And I think that they've bought a player that I'm so desperate to watch in the Premier League, and I just think that for me he's one of the best midfielders in Italy. Obviously we'd want him to do well just to also see what he can then produce for the national team, but that was one that I didn't see coming at all.
Yeah, Tonali was the big surprise, especially at the price. I think actually what I'm similarly enthusiastic to you about him as a player, Mina, I think very much in the sort of hierarchy of Italian midfielders. There's Nicola Barella at Inter, and then there's this sort of gap, and Tonali's the next one coming, and he's younger and he's got more ahead of him. But I think 80 million sort of in Italy was a bit of a wow moment. But at the same time,
you don't think he's worth 80 million?
Well, I think right now he's a step behind. But I think what really makes you think it can be a good investment with Tonali is the way things played out for him when he arrived at Milan. When he first came there on loan from Brescia, there was a first season where things really didn't go at all how you thought they would. And 3 seasons later, he goes as a player who, I think the Champions League was the great making of him this year. You saw even as they exited the Champions League to Inter, their rivals, he was the one raging against the dying of the light. He was the one carrying that team. He was the one who really had that energy and fight about him. And I think the attitude, the work ethic, the way he's improved in 3 years there is what Newcastle are buying. You're buying someone who I think has really a good... You're buying a good kid, basically.
Yeah, you are.
80 million quid for a good kid. An expensive price to pay. Would you say, looking at Newcastle, the way he plays, there's obviously a bit of confusion because when he first came on the scene, people said he played as a 6. Then, obviously, in the Champions League run last season, he was like a box-to-box. They obviously have Bruno Guimaraes there as well. How do you think the two of them two will work together?
Yeah, I think... So I don't want to downplay it too much with a good kid. I mean, we're still talking about Italy International. We're still talking about someone who was the best Milan player on the pitch in the second leg of a Champions League semi-final. Sorry, he is a good footballer. I just think he still has a lot of room for growth. And the step to the Premier League, it's going to be a challenge for him. It's going to be something new and different. In terms of who he is as a player, look, his idol was Gennaro Gattuso. There's the famous mug he has when he was a kid with Gattuso all over it that got dropped and smashed, and he loved it so much he had to put it all back together. But I think he's much more modern than Gattuso. He plays high up the pitch. He's a ball winner high up the pitch. I think he's most comfortable playing in a high press, being on the front foot. But he is a ball winner and a scrapper more than he is the Andrea Pirlo that he was cast at earlier.
Yeah, no, he's not that. I think he's a tactical joker. So I think that's the best thing that you have about him, and it's telling that in a lot of the analysis that they would do on Milan's play at Sky in Italy, and when they sit around, they always used to say he's that weapon that Pioli has, and he would read the opponent, study the opponent, and then give instructions, especially to Tonali, to change the game according to how they can neutralise the opponent. That could mean that sometimes he's played just behind the attack and been somebody that can go into the box and actually score goals. He's able to deliver assists. He can play really in a lot of different positions. But yes, I think that his best one is recovering possession. But I think that it also changes as well how you balance the midfield. I felt sorry for him a little bit last season because he had to cover much more ground than was necessary, because they didn't have as many midfielders as they wanted. So I think if you balance the midfield, you get more from him. But if you ask him to do a lot, then obviously the quality will start to diminish towards the end of the games. Yeah.
Well, at Milan, he was on the left of this midfield where you have outside you Leao and Theo Hernandez. Now, those two are not known for their defending, so at times he had to be covering for them. But also, if you watched how Milan played, he was very often overlapping with them, attacking, sometimes going all the way out to the wing.
Yeah.
He is a very versatile player, and I think if you listen to Eddie Howe at Newcastle, that's probably exactly why they've signed him, for his versatility, not to fit into one particular box, but because you're buying, again, to not harp on the young thing, but a young player who is flexible and who you think, I can use you in different ways to help what I'm trying to do, which is build a squad to compete in Europe.
Yeah. Another deal that's happened as well that's caused a lot of excitement for Manchester United fans. Andre Onana has moved to Manchester United. Supporters calling him a transformational signing in terms of how he will be able to adapt and evolve Erik ten Hag's Manchester United. Would you agree with that?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think that for a long time, obviously, they haven't had a player who perhaps, a goalkeeper who's used his feet into here as much as what Andre Onana can bring to that. I think that a lot of the times you watch Onana and you have your hand on your chest because you're like, get rid of it, get rid of it. And then he just shows you just how good he is on the ball. And I think it's magnificent to watch because of how comfortable he is. So he toes the line sometimes between like giving you a heart attack to producing something that can be a little bit magical. So he does take risks in the way that he plays, but he's also intelligent in knowing what risks to take. And I think that he is somebody that really elevates, I think, the style of play. It gives you different options to play from the back. I do hope that people sometimes, you know, when you buy players, or rather goalkeepers like Alisson or Edison, there will be mistakes made because they do take risks. But what they can produce going forward, what they can add to your attack, the variety of ways in which you can progress the ball up the field really is why you're buying him. It's that ability that he has on the ball. It's his leadership qualities at the back as well. And obviously for the experience that brings. I mean, he was just... How many clean sheets did he keep in the Champions League? How much of a difference did he make in the final? So I think this is why you're buying him, and I think it will really change United's game. And I'm glad that it's Erik ten Hag because obviously he knows him so well.
I think we should stay in Manchester. Their shopping list in Italy hasn't quite finished yet. They're looking at Rasmus Højlund at Atlanta. A big fee has been spoken about. Obviously, I've seen a lot of people on sort of social media say Haaland, Højlund, similar name, blonde hair. What do you make of him?
It's so easy, isn't it? Yeah. Similar name, they're both tall, they both got that sort of Nordic quality to them. But no, it's wildly unfair on Højlund to put him in a basket with Erling Haaland, who is one of the 2 or 3 best players on the planet. But in terms of stylistically what sort of striker you're getting, yes, he's a number 9 who wants to attack the box. He's got that really... I think for a young player, what stands out about him, obviously, he's very explosive, he's very fast, he's got the physicality, which is all sort of the tools, but he's got that very predatory instinct about him. I don't think he's yet everything you imagine in modern football in terms of the player who links play and brings everything together and can be glue. But in terms of someone who just gets into the box, attacks those areas, knows where the dangerous places to be are, those are the things that stand out about Højlund at this point in his career. I think he's definitely... still a very unpolished diamond, and I think with the numbers that are being talked about, I'm a bit worried about the level of expectation that's going to be set for him coming in. But I do think there's heaps of potential there in terms of, again, the instincts and the physical tools are all present.
Actually, I think he enjoys it. That's the reason that I would probably go for him. I mean, I'm always worried about buying players from Atalanta because it's obviously a system-based club and they have a very clear system in Gasperini, who spends so much time nurturing talent, which hopefully he will have in Erik ten Hag. But he is somebody who seems to sort of sometimes enjoy the pressure, enjoy the performance of it all. And he comes in, he's very confident of himself. And you can see the way that even the way he plays football, if he's got just a goalkeeper ahead of him, you know, sometimes you'll think, oh, they'll start going through all their choices and then make mistakes. Sometimes goalkeeper, the pressure of getting that goal. He's very calm on the ball. I think his speed of thought is one of the best things about him, variety of shots, obviously. But in the second game, when he was in Sturm Graz, just before he arrived at Atalanta, in the second game, he went and celebrated in front of the away fans against Rapid Vienna. And he was told, you know, it wasn't a really good idea. And he was like, no, I'm here to show you that I'm great. So he has a lot of belief in himself. He's a good kid. Every morning he would come in and shake hands with everyone in the club. And so he is somebody who makes an atmosphere and is fun to have in your team. But obviously, you know, you don't want to expect the world from him, but it's like Nikki said, there's a lot of potential. It's about what you can extract from that.
He's got that swagger, hasn't he?
Yeah.
Sometimes that's what you want your centre forward. You want to just think, yeah, they're going to walk in and feel like they're the boss.
Yeah, but it's going to take time and he needs a lot of attention. And I don't know sometimes whether big clubs with a lot of pressure have that.
Well, you built him up quite nicely there, which is
I feel
good.
bad now.
We're here again in a transfer window, and we're here again talking about Romelu Lukaku.
The gift that keeps on giving.
Yeah, just explain this saga for us, because Inter, first of all, we were talking about wanting him, and then it turned into Juventus. What are the implications of Romelu Lukaku's future? Where's he going to end up?
Oh gosh, I feel like Romelu Lukaku, sometimes on the pitch, if you think about the Champions League final, but certainly off the pitch, can't get out of his own way sometimes. You know, like he's gone on 2 years in a row. We've seen him on Sky Sport in Italy, giving these emotional interviews about how much he loves Inter and, you know, wanting to be back at Inter. And then when he was back at Inter, how much, you know, that was a place for him. And this summer, Inter worked really hard actually to try and put a deal together for Lukaku. That was something they wanted to do. The Onana sale made some money available that made it possible. They were working on that deal. And certainly the story that's now come from the Inter side of things is, and then we found out while we were doing this, while his teammates were sort of getting on the emotional side of it, sending him these WhatsApp messages saying, we can't wait to have you back. It turns out he was negotiating with our biggest rival, Juventus. And so on a sort of emotional level, I think Inter feel very betrayed by him. And on a sort of Lukaku level, you look at it and feel like he's burned a few bridges for himself. And now Juventus might be the one real sort of destination for him. I think Juventus, personally, I think that will probably happen. I don't know if Mina feels differently on this.
Yeah.
Because I think that Juventus are looking in very pragmatic terms at a player that we know can score goals in Serie A. He's been there and done it in a year when they're not going to be in Europe and they want to get back on top of the pile. But I do think he's made his own life harder with some of how he's gone about things.
I think that if he didn't, like, I mean, with all due respect, he's allowed to go and talk to whichever club he wants at the end of the day, you know. What Inter really stressed towards the end of the season is that he's going back to Chelsea. And they sort of really stressed that because up until March, he wasn't really the best striker in Italy. I mean, he wasn't even scoring goals from open play. There was a problem there. But since then, it really took off sort of in the last few weeks. He was magical to watch. He had gone back to being sort of the Lukaku that we remember in Italy. But I think that they sort of made it clear he's going back to Chelsea and then they would see what happens. So from his point of view, he's allowed to talk to whoever he wants to talk, obviously. I think where he goes wrong a lot of the times is the interviews he gives and how dramatic he is in these interviews in the sense of, you know, when asked about whether or not he would ever go to another Italian club, never. So, no, there's really no need for it because we understand that you're a professional and you're allowed to play wherever you want to play. And so, you know, just there's no need for all of this stuff. But I think, yeah, it is about getting you out of your own way. But whether he not, I don't know, because I know that Allegri wants him there. I think that Giuntoli, who is their sporting director now, sort of enjoys destabilising a competitor in Inter and making them very emotional about letting go of their prized asset. So from many ways, they've sort of, you know, managed something quite remarkable in that sense. But I wouldn't be surprised if it's Saudi either.
I mean, yeah, it wouldn't actually be that surprising.
Right?
There's a lot of striker conversation during every single transfer window. I like a bit of midfielder conversation in there. Sofian Amrabat, we actually sat and spoke about him a few times. Is he eventually going to leave Fiorentina this window, do we think? Yeah.
I think this is basically nearly a done deal. I think he really wanted to leave over the winter after that great World Cup performance to go to Barcelona, who had really wanted him at the time. And they sort of really managed to keep him on board and to stay with Fiorentina. He is playing with a lot of injections. He really had to fight towards the end there because he was exhausted after that World Cup, which worries me a little bit. But he will get his wish now, and his wish is to move to a bigger club, something that can really compete for trophies. And he obviously has that in Manchester United. It will be around 30 million, but probably including all of the bonuses and performance-based. He's obviously, we've seen what he's done in the World Cup. He's a brilliant player. Great at sort of recycling possession, winning back the ball, advancing the position as well. He's one of those defensive midfielders that produce the most amount of goals into the final third. So we know what he can do. It's about whether or not he can play through a lot of sometimes exhaustion that is placed on his shoulders because he does so much.
I think it's a very good price for him.
Yeah.
I think it's a very good price for him like that. For a Premier League club, I think it's a very affordable price for a player who absolutely can do it at a high level.
Yeah, well, we'll see how that one develops, Sophie and Amrabat. Nikki, Mina, thank you so much for coming in. Really appreciate your time today. Fascinating. You'll be back next time for more. There was loads we couldn't actually fit in there, so make sure you come back next time. Coming up, we're back to the Premier League. We're going to talk West Ham next. West Ham fans get in touch, looking to bring in new faces. Could Scott McTominay be one of them? Welcome back to Transfer Talk. The panel are back. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Let's get to West Ham as they look to try and find a replacement for Declan Rice. They've seen a £40 million bid rejected for Chelsea midfielder Conor Gallagher, but we're told they haven't given up on signing him. West Ham, we're told, getting encouragement from the players' side that he may well be open to the move, so it could end up coming down to the player. Chelsea, they've lost a number of experienced central midfielders over the last year or two. Can you see them sanctioning a move for Conor Gallagher?
It would be a strange one at the moment, just purely down to the numbers that Chelsea have in that central midfield area. They are very, very light in central midfield. I think from a West Ham perspective, it would be a good signing, but I'd be interested to see where he would fit into West Ham's setup. They're known for playing more of a 4-2-3-1 or playing three at the back, which would mean I don't really see Gallagher playing ahead of Paquetá as a 10. Is he suited to being a number 6? I don't think that's his skill set at all. We spoke about it earlier when he was at Palace. He was playing as like a free 8, enabled him to press more, get high up the pitch, get in the box and score goals, and he did very, very well that season. I'm not sure West Ham's style of football under David Moyes plays to Gallagher's strengths of being able to do that. But then I look at Poch playing 4-2-3-1 at Chelsea, and same problem. Don't see him as playing as a number 10 there. Don't think he's got the skill set to play as a number 6. So I think this is a big summer for Conor Gallagher, and I feel like we probably said that 12 months ago and in January as well. But he kind of just needs to settle and know where his football's going to be. Is he going to be a big player at Chelsea moving forward? If so, maybe stay there. Or does he move across London again and maybe get himself going, get his career really ticking? Because he gets picked for every England squad as well, doesn't he? Conor Gallagher, there's a good player there, but I very much think it has to be in the right system that suits him.
Yeah. West Ham are not just looking at Conor Gallagher, other options on the table for them?
Yeah, they've held initial talks with Manchester United over the signing of Scott McTominay, but we understand there's a big gap in the valuation that West Ham are willing to pay at the moment and what Man United are willing to sell him for. And we're also told United see McTominay as a top player and a very important member of the squad. And when you consider he played 39 matches for them last season in all competitions, that highlights the fact, despite the fact he's not always starting for United, he is a key part of their team. And for them to even consider a sale at this point, it requires a very big offer. That's what we're being told. And clubs now know that West Ham do have the Declan Rice money, £100 million pretty much up front, 105 if you include the add-ons as well. So that will be an issue for West Ham. These clubs know that West Ham at this moment in time are desperate to find that Declan Rice replacement, potentially even 2 players. And they've got the money as well. So those clubs will be driving a hard bargain. It looks like Manchester United are at this moment in time as well.
I think that would be a great signing for West Ham, but from Manchester United's point of view now, they're trying to build a squad, and like you said, I think McTominay is still a pivotal part of that squad. I think the problem with him and Fred was they were playing every single week, and they probably weren't up to the required quality for a team that wants to push towards the higher end of the Premier League. But having those two to come in for certain games and use them to Manchester United's advantage, I think that's perfect. So I think Manchester United should be hanging on to McTominay and Fred now that they're not regular starters every single week. I think they're key squad players.
Yeah, Manchester United fans do get in touch with us on that. I mean, we were talking there about West Ham midfielders. We're told they're also expected to push to sign the Southampton midfielder, James Ward-Prowse, as well. They've had a long-standing interest in the midfielder, which dates back actually before this summer's transfer window and over the past couple of windows as well. So it looks like West Ham interested in signing not just one player to replace Declan Rice, but maybe even 2 or 3. They've held talks over the last couple of months with Juventus over Denis Zakaria. He was on loan at Chelsea, you remember, last season. They've got an interest as well in Monaco's Youssouf Fofana. They also held talks with Ajax over Edson Alvarez as well. So they've got plenty of irons in the fire, West Ham, with those midfield reinforcements. But as we've been saying, no signings over the line yet. At what point do West Ham fans start to become a little bit worried about this transfer window, or are we past that point now?
I think we're probably past that point. I think the problem they've got is they almost need to sign someone so that everyone else in the window doesn't think they're just sat on a load of cash. And that's essentially what Manchester United are kind of doing, where they're sort of going, we know you've got 100 million. On a normal day, we may give you McTominay for half the price. But because you've got the money now, we're going to charge you twice. So they also then probably need a centre-back because they've had lots of injuries. They could probably do with a striker because of Antonio potentially leaving, Skamaka's situation that's been talked about. And so there's 2 or 3 players there that they definitely need to bring in. And then on top of that, they actually needed to add players last season as well without losing Rice. So they're in this situation where they're losing players a little too quickly and are not adding players quickly enough. The season's a few weeks away. And I think West Ham fans will be genuinely worried at this point.
Well, we'll see how that one develops. Let's talk a little bit more about Manchester United now. They've acted pretty quickly so far in this transfer window. Attention turning to their striker situation. We mentioned it before. Erik ten Hag has been speaking about that, and as you might expect, he's quite keen to get a striker in.
What I can say is we do everything what's in our power to get that done. And it's up to me, as soon as possible. How earlier, the better, because we have to integrate them in the team, in the way of play. So, in an ideal situation, he was already here, but you're not always getting ideal situations as manager, and that is then you have to deal with the situation.
And you were asked about an attacker the other day. There's been a lot of talk since then. I just wondered if you've made any progress in getting that striker that you need over the line.
We make progress, yeah. But if you know how it works. When we have him, we will tell you directly.
I feel like Erik ten Hag's going to be fielding more of those questions over the next couple of weeks. He's already taken some big decisions, Erik ten Hag, about players leaving the club. Notably Cristiano Ronaldo. David De Gea has left this summer. He's shown quite a ruthless streak. Manchester United's challenge over the last few years has seemed to be getting money in for fringe players. We've seen Anthony Elanga move for £15 million to Nottingham Forest. You talked about perhaps United needing to keep Scott McTominay, but do they need to move on some fringe players to get some money back in?
Well, they've got their financial restraints anyway in place, so in a way they simply have to. What they probably want to do in an ideal world is sell a player for a lot of money so they don't have to ship out 2 or 3. Dan's completely right there. If they lose Scott McTominay and Fred and bring in another body, they're still one body down. And that was the sort of conversation last season when Casemiro was suspended and Eriksen couldn't play 90 minutes. Then they were ending up in a situation where it was McTominay and Fred every single week. So they actually need to add players. But then they do have players like Harry Maguire, where you wonder how much is he going to play, and is now a good time to sell him? Or maybe Ten Hag and Manchester United are hoping, let's bleed him back into the side, get his value up, and then sell him on. But in the end, there is going to come a point where they have to let go of a few players, and I think they're just sort of trying to pick and choose who they let go of and for how much money.
Coming up here on Transfer Talk, Everton are after a striker, and we've got an update for you as well on the pursuit of El Bilal Touré. Also, we're going to talk Fulham as well. Stay with us here on Transfer Talk. Welcome back. This is Transfer Talk. We're going to talk Moise Caicedo now. We are told that he will not be sold by Brighton unless his asking price is met. Now, that asking price is thought to be £100 million. Talks with Chelsea have reached a bit of an impasse. I know Darmesh on the transfer show last night was told that talks between the clubs was moving at a glacial pace, so it doesn't seem like that deal or transfer is anywhere near a conclusion. Brighton have tweeted a picture recently. It says, when Moyes smiles, we all smile. That's been posted in the last few hours. They're playing the game, James, aren't they?
Very much so, and as far as they're concerned, they're, I think, keen to point out that they won't stop players leaving, but only if their valuation is met. And we've seen that in the past with the likes of Marc Cucurella. Things got quite frosty between Brighton and Chelsea last time when it came to his signing. Ben White, they got £50 million for him. They weren't willing to back down. They got what they wanted. Perhaps they will get what they want with Moises Caicedo, and £100 million if that's what they're after. They see Caicedo as a player that should be ranked in a similar bracket to Declan Rice when it comes to the fee. I think we're in a situation, though, where Caicedo would perhaps feel right to be a bit confused, because the way Roberto De Zerbi was speaking about at the end of last season was that he thought it was likely that Caicedo and McAllister would leave. McAllister left so soon after the end of the season. Liverpool wrapped that up really quickly and got a really good fee for him. But it doesn't look like this Caicedo deal is something which Chelsea will look to work on over a period of time. One thing, Pochettino will be desperate to get his man in soon, because, as we've spoken about before, it does feel like there's a gap in that Chelsea midfield at the moment. They probably need to get in a player like Caicedo as soon as possible to integrate him before the start of the season, just over 2 weeks until their first game against Liverpool. But Brighton are fairly comfortable with how they sit at the moment, and they're not going to be pushed around by Chelsea, because they've not shown that they're willing to be buzzed around by any of these top Premier League clubs.
I think from Chelsea's perspective, the core of their midfield this time last year was Kovacic, Jorginho, Kante and Mount. None of them are there now, which would have been unthinkable 12 months ago. So they need to get a high-level player in, and I think Caicedo is that player. But Brighton have got every right to ask for £100 million, because he is one of the top young players in the Premier League.
We've got a little bit of breaking news to bring you, and it comes from Bournemouth. Transfer news just reaching us here on Transfer Talk. Bournemouth have agreed a deal with Inter Milan for goalkeeper Ionut Radu. We're told it's a season-long loan with an option to buy next summer. That's an option, so not an obligation. The 26-year-old is a Romania international. We're told he's going to be flying into the UK in the next 24 hours and is due to start his medical tomorrow. So Bournemouth have agreed a deal with Inter for goalkeeper Ionut Radu. He had a couple of loan spells last season at Cremonese and Auxerre, and now Bournemouth strengthening their goalkeeper position. That's the breaking news here on Transfer Talk. Let's move on and talk a little bit about Romeo Lavia, because Sky in Germany reporting today, their reporter Florian Plettenberg saying that Liverpool favourites to now sign the Southampton midfielder. No agreement between the clubs as of yet, negotiations ongoing. We're told that he's going to be involved in Southampton's next pre-season friendly. Romeo Lavia to Liverpool, would that be a good fit for you?
Well, Liverpool will need a six eventually at some point, because it seems as though Fabinho is set to go to Saudi Arabia. They've obviously lost Henderson as well. And in all fairness, about 70% of last season was spent by Liverpool fans saying we need a new six. Now, although I do think Lavia is a top young player who's moulded on Fernandinho, so he has similar sort of attributes, pretty good in ground duels, really good in possession, a really good passer, lots of variation to his passing game. I do also fear on the flip side that with Liverpool playing with McAllister and Szoboszlai, potentially Trent tucking in from right back, you might have a midfielder here who's extremely inexperienced in the Premier League, but then also he's not as defensively minded as someone like Fabinho, and so there is a slight issue there in terms of fit. However, he may be one of two that Liverpool sign, and I think from what I've seen on social media, Liverpool fans are hoping he's one of 3 or 4 that Liverpool signed. So I think ultimately he's a top footballer, but at this moment in time to revamp that whole midfield and base it around a young kid in the middle, it will be tough.
You're a fully paid-up member of the Lavia fan club, aren't you?
Yeah,
lifetime membership.
I've not really shut up about him all morning, have I, to be fair, in the office. I just think he's such a high-level player already. His football IQ is through the roof. The way he wriggles himself out of tight spaces, the way he takes the ball, his body shape, the way his passing is very good. He breaks up the play. I just think over the next 10 years, if you sign him, you have got an unbelievable midfielder who is only going to get better. And I think I get what you're saying about them probably still needing a six, and maybe he's not that six. But if you look at how Klopp has stereotypically played, Fabinho and Henderson coming towards the end of their careers, I think that them going perhaps accelerates what Liverpool have been looking to do with that rebuild. But I think it's a great thing, because I think Lavia is more suited to that kind of rock and roll football that we associate Klopp with. Lavia is built for that, and I think if Klopp gets his hands on him, such a good manager, Liverpool, they'll have such a good player on their hands. OK,
we'll wait and see on developments on that here on Transfer Talk. Everton remain in negotiations with Almeria over the transfer of El Bilal Touré. You may have seen reports on your feeds today that the player had already decided to join Atalanta. The 21-year-old Mali striker, though, is set to decide his next move in the next few days. And from our information, Everton's still in the frame for that, having agreed a deal with the La Liga club. How much, James, do Everton need a striker?
Well, last season they survived relegation by the skin of their teeth, and they did the year before under Frank Lampard. And last season they only scored 34 goals from 38 league matches. And we can see they're in desperate need of a goal scorer. And we can see some of the stats really about what happened last season and how they managed to stay up without a real true goal scorer. Calvert-Lewin only started 15 matches last season. Mbappe, who was brought in the summer, 11 starts, only 4 of those under Sean Dyche. So Calvert-Lewin scoring twice. Neil Maupay scoring 1. Arnaud Danjuma has been signed, and he has been signed this summer. And what's quite interesting is in the statement that was read by Everton, the fact he could be used as a striker this season. But looking at the stats there, it shows they are crying out for a goal scorer. There'll be hopes that Dominic Calvert-Lewin can recover his form, recover his fitness and play a key role this season. But the fact that their top scorer was Dwight McNeil, a wide player with 7 goals, and they really relied on the midfield to get them over the line. Just 20 goals in the 20 matches Sean Dyche had at the helm. But Danjuma did score 16 in the season before last under Unai Emery at Villarreal. If he can offer something like that, it would be helpful. But I think they are in real need of someone who can play in that central role and take the weight off Dominic Calvert-Lewin, because you can't go into this season, I think, with his track record with injuries, thinking he's going to be the main man for them this year.
I mean, those numbers are pathetic, aren't they? The Correa only played the second half of the season and he was their second top goal scorer. Anthony Gordon left in January and he was quite high up on the list as well. You know, those numbers are low. Everton will be in trouble if they don't rectify that. 4
of those McNeil-Doucouré goals came in that Brighton game. So they're struggling.
Yeah.
What about Fulham? Now, they're likely to sign one of Calvin Bassey or Mohamed Salisu. An agreement has been reached in principle with Ajax for Bassey, the fee around £18 million. And Fulham also now close to an agreement with Southampton over Salisu for £15 million. One source has told us that Fulham leaning towards Salisu. No final decision has been taken. Personal terms may well be a factor in which one they choose. So we've got a couple of minutes left. Who would you choose out of those two?
Salisu for me. Before he signed for Southampton, I think we had a conversation about him, and I sort of said I'm a massive fan of his. I think he's good in possession. He was sort of unlucky because Southampton were at times poor, and not at times, they were actually dreadful last season. And he was sort of one of these players that I actually thought, along with Lavia, were the 2 players that stood out. He defends well in wide areas. He's an upgrade on 35-year-old Tim Ream as a left-sided centre-back. He can also play left-back as well, which might come useful. I think overall, it's a very well-packaged deal for Fulham. Obviously, you're a Bassey fan, so...
Give the case for Bassey.
I mean, it's quite a bizarre setup, isn't it, to be in, like, it's so advanced with 2 players, but then you're only going to choose one at the end of it. That feels very strange and not something that happens, and it's certainly something that's not public knowledge. I've just always liked Bassey. I think in that Europa run that Rangers had, he was a massive part of that, and I'll never forget how good he was in that final. He was linked with Villa at one point as well. He's 6 foot, I think 6'4", 6'5". He can play left back as well. I think he played a lot of football for Ajax at left back last season. Good distributor, good at bringing the ball out, but that recovery pace and getting back, I think that's massive with Bassey, and I'd like to see him in the Premier League. And Fulham fans need some good news, because there seems to be a lot of doom and gloom around there at the moment.
I think we should let James decide. I mean,
You've got to decide in both.
It's difficult to call, isn't it? Because Salisu's got that Premier League experience. I mean, the end of last season didn't seem to work out. He didn't seem to want to feature, and he didn't play a role really in Southampton's dismal end to the year. Calvin Bassey has had opportunities playing in Scotland and at Ajax now. I think more than anything, they just need to bring a player in. I feel like there's a lot of doom and gloom around Fulham at the moment because of what's going on with Alexander Mitrovic, not currently training with his teammates, not part of the squad. Marco Silva, he said no for now for Saudi Arabia, but if he doesn't bring any players in, then we wait to see how long that stance remains.
That was a no comment from James on which one he was going to choose there. Good Morning Transfers returns tomorrow at 9 o'clock right here on Sky Sports News. Join us for that. Thank you to the panel, Nabay, Dan, James. Thank you very much. We are back tomorrow, but stay with us here on Sky Sports News. We're building up to the final Ashes test at the Oval. England, can they make it 2-2?